Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us to talk about using a donor or a surrogate. We have some really great information to share with you and prize giveaways at the end of the webinar. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items. A recording of this webinar will be available, so you'll receive that via email. And we'd love to hear from you during the webinar. If you have any questions, you can submit them through the Q&A function. We just ask that you keep questions open-ended. If you have anything specific to your circumstances, we ask that you do request or do schedule an appointment. And we also encourage you to follow us on social media. If you're not already, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook for Fertility Centers of Illinois. Also, Dr. Allison Rodgers on Instagram and TikTok, where she has over 1.2 million followers. So always some really great content there. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Rodgers.
Thank you. I am so honored today to be talking with you guys. I'm also going to be joined by a bunch of esteemed colleagues and patients. So we've got Curtis and Josh, who are, I don't know if everyone can see the whole panel, who are previous patients. And I have Monica Nitschmann, who is our director of our third party department. And we are going to get into some of the nitty gritty today, going through, trying to break it down because it can be really overwhelming to think about all the things that need to fall into place. So let's get started. All right. Let's see if it'll let me. Oh, there we go. Okay, this is me. Hello, I'm Dr. Allison Rodgers. I am one of the senior partners and managing partners at Fertility Centers of Illinois. Also, you can follow me at dr.allison.rodgers on social media. We've got, like I said, Monica, Curtis, and Josh, who are going to be joining me as well. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about FCI, getting started with treatment options. We're going to do a Q&A, leave plenty of time for questions, and then we have a prize giveaway. I'm so excited. All right, so about FCI, I have been personally with FCI for over 9 years, 9.5 years, almost 10. We have more than 100 years of combined physician experience. We have over 42,000 babies. I can tell you personally, I have about one baby born every day, personally. Oh no, is my thing going weird again? Can you guys see that? Oh, there it got fixed. Okay. 20 plus years serving the LGBTQ plus community. We have 8 locations, working on some new ones as well that should be open soon, and 11 physicians. That includes 10 reproductive endocrinologists and a male fertility urologist. We are all over. All right, here we are. There's me at the bottom left. Dr. Sam Olander, middle right there is, our reproductive urologist. He is phenomenal. And we are all board certified and board eligible reproductive endocrinologists who've done thousands and thousands of cases and love what we do. Okay, we're going to start getting into it. So why would somebody use a donor, either sperm donor or egg donor or embryo donor, or a surrogate, or the other term for it is a gestational carrier? So some patients have a medical condition where they couldn't carry, so somebody with a uterus might not be able to carry their own pregnancy because of a specific medical condition, either a problem with the uterus itself or other medical conditions. For example, I had a patient today who has a history of liver transplant, needs to be on really strong medications to prevent rejection of her new liver. That's someone who might not be able to carry a pregnancy. Genetic conditions. So if you have a genetic condition that's not necessarily something that can be screened for, you may decide to use an egg donor or sperm donor. Are single parents by choice. Those are single moms or single dads. LGBTQ patients, and then certainly patients who've failed other treatments will sometimes use a gestational carrier or surrogate. And then advanced maternal age for people who have ovaries. Those ovaries have a finite amount of time that they're making healthy eggs. Usually for most people between 42 and 44, they stop having healthy eggs. And if patients are not done with their child or family building, then this is a fantastic opportunity. All right, so we are going to get into what we can do to help you. So obviously there are many ways to grow a family, and we're here to help you every step of the way. So one of the unique things, and if you are listening to this webinar, I would encourage you, whether you're coming to us or looking at other clinics, you want to be at a clinic that has a dedicated team who is there for third-party reproduction. For us, we call it our Center for Collaborative Reproduction. And this is a dedicated team of specialized staff. In order to have this dedicated team, it has to be a big enough clinic who's doing enough cases. And that's what you want. Somebody with a lot of experience who's doing this day in and day out. In fact, I have a patient today who saw me for the first time who had asked me, how many patients have you taken care of that have used gestational carriers? It was a fair question. I've been doing this a while, got some gray hairs, but that's a fair question, right? Is this something that you're doing like once a year, maybe? Or is this something that you have whatever, 5 to 10 patients a month at any one time, right? And so I think that's a really fair question. I think that it's really important that you find a partner in this process that's going to guide you through all of these steps, right? Obviously, just ordering sperm and using a sperm donor is a little bit more straightforward than maybe using a gestational carrier and an egg donor. So we are here to help you with all of those things. So trying to help figure out what insurance does and does not cover, looking at financing options, being able to provide legal resources. Being in the state of Illinois is a very pro-reproductive state. In fact, I just had a patient who saw me today from Michigan who needs a gestational carrier, and she's not able to use a gestational carrier depending on what state she's from. And so in Illinois, gestational carriers are legal. There is a very pro-reproductive process, and we have reproductive attorneys we work with and help protect your parental rights. And then obviously we have mental health providers on our team that help with support, emotional support, and that. All the financial coordinators, and it's a phenomenal team of a whole group of lots of different people who have to work together really effectively to be successful. So who's on your team? Now, this is just an example. We've got a lot of other physicians and other nurses and stuff like that, but your team would include somebody like me or one of my partners. So one of the physicians, one of our Center for Collaborative Reproductive nurses, a third-party liaison like Monica there, a psychologist. This is a picture of Dr. Edwards at the bottom. We have a psychologist and social worker on our team, and a financial coordinator. Oh, this is a little weird. And oh, there it goes. And all of these people work together to help you navigate the process. Obviously, there's other people involved in terms of the lab, creating embryos, the medical component of putting together treatment plans, but really these are the key people who are helping you navigate your care. All right, so how do you get started growing your family? So 3 steps in this. First, schedule an appointment, and that can either be in person or virtual. I think all of us at FCI are doing both in person and virtual appointments. And which makes it convenient. So you can do what is most convenient for you. It's important to discuss your goals. So this is where I always talk with new patients about goals. So looking at how many children do you want? Do you if it's a 2 male couple, do you want 1 child with one person's sperm, one child with another person's sperm? If it's a 2 female couple, are we doing reciprocal IVF? Whose eggs are we using? Whose uterus are we using? And really talking about family planning, not just how to get you pregnant or how to get your gestational carrier pregnant, but how are you growing your family? It's important that, and obviously to be able to know this, it's important that we might need to do some fertility testing, certainly make sure there's sperm, make sure there's eggs, and also connect you with our third-party team and our financial counselors so you can have a very transparent idea of what to expect from that financial perspective, and also an appropriate timeline, right? So there is a sometimes some of these steps take some time and understanding in a realistic way what to expect. So let's talk about that initial, hold on a second, initial consult meeting with your physician. There I am. So like I said, we can either meet in person or over telehealth. For me, it doesn't matter either way. And we discuss, like I said, your medical history, your family building goals, and what we want to accomplish together. And, we review any already done or completed testing. And we meet together with that team we talked about, right? Nurse, financial coordinator, psychologist, third-party liaison, and we really work together about putting together a plan for testing and next steps. And this is something that's very individualized. So there's not any sort of cookie cutter approach. There's no standardized, everyone gets the same thing. No, I mean, obviously there are some things that are required from the FDA. There's a lot of FDA oversight in what we do. And there's certainly some things are required to be able to do treatment, but really it's about your goals, your history, and putting together something specifically for you and your family. And then certainly we would connect you with your financial counselor, who will go over what insurance benefits you have and what to expect from a financial perspective. All right, so what kind of testing do we do? If you are a person with ovaries and a uterus, we want to understand, are you ovulating? Do you have any sort of ovulatory disorder like PCOS or a normal number of eggs? If you are a person with a uterus, we will do an ultrasound to see if there's anything, if you're planning on carrying a pregnancy, if we do this for a gestational carrier, we would do this for somebody carrying their own pregnancy. We want to make sure the uterus is healthy, that there's no polyps or fibroids, anything that could interfere with the ability to get and stay pregnant. Looking at the fallopian tubes, making sure there's nothing that could interfere with getting pregnant or staying pregnant. And then in terms of a semen analysis, those of you who might know me from social media, I spend a lot of time talking about sperm quality, and it's really important to look at numbers of sperm and quality. So not only are sperm moving, but do they have normal shapes, and do we think there's any issues or anything that we can improve upon? Certainly, we always are reviewing other potential causes of infertility in terms of egg quality, recurrent pregnancy loss, that kind of thing. But really, it's important to realize we need three main things to have a baby. We need eggs, sperm, and a uterus. And whether the patients who are the intended parents are bringing that whatever of those three things to the table, we will help you complete out the rest so that we can help you have a healthy baby. Oh, here we go. Just like I said, eggs, sperm, uterus, this is all we need. So, for example, a same-sex female couple, they may have an egg and a uterus, which can come from the same partner, different partners, but they need donor sperm. For a single woman, right, they need donor sperm, but they may have the egg and the uterus. For a single man or a same-sex male couple, they have the sperm, but they need the egg and the uterus. So this is where we sort of help with all the different, whatever you've got, we'll help you figure out the rest. In terms of family building, and this is a little bit about what we talked about, there's a lot of options. And understanding, for example, if you are trying to have a baby and you don't have a uterus, or your partner doesn't have a uterus, trying to figure out are you going to have a gestational carrier, or do you need to go through an agency to help find one? Is there someone in your life? And if you're a single woman, you'll probably carry your own pregnancy. But if you're in a same-sex female relationship, there's usually two uteruses there and you get to choose. Some couples will say, sometimes there's like one person who wants to carry all the pregnancies, the other person has no desire. Other times, like they each want to carry one at a time. So these are things that we need to review and figure out in terms of helping you not only reach your short-term goals, but your longer-term goals of family building. So like we said, who's going to give the eggs if there's more than one person who has eggs in the relationship? Who's going to give the sperm if there's more than one person who has sperm in the relationship? And then who's going to carry the pregnancy? there's more than one person who has a uterus. And trying to figure out each individual patient and or couple, what they want, what their goals are, and trying to figure out if there's any medical conditions or underlying fertility issues that may affect their chance of success. For example, in a same-sex female relationship, if it's all about egg quality, right? So if there's a partner who's 35 and another one who's 45, and they want to use the 45-year-old's eggs, unlikely to be successful because most of us by 45 don't have healthy eggs anymore. So this is where trying to understand both the desires of the couple and then also looking at the medical the ability for them to be successful, the prognosis is going to be really important. For all of my patients, I have them meet with our amazing third-party team, and they help with all of the services from donated eggs, sperm, embryos, and gestational carriers. So they help with that selection to make sure that the person is a good fit from a genetic perspective, medical perspective. They help me with all of the medical screening for the donors. There is very rigorous for both gestational carriers and egg donors and sperm donors. There's very rigorous evaluation and testing. So there's psychological for egg donors and gestational carriers, there's psychological evaluation, there's genetic evaluation, there's infectious disease evaluation, and health evaluation, and as well as fertility. And so there's a lot of steps in that process that we help you manage and help work through, and including some required FDA testing. So anytime we put tissue from one human into another human, whether it's a kidney transplant, a heart transplant, or an embryo or an egg donor, a gestational carrier, we're taking genetic material, biologic material, putting it from one person into another. That is requiring the FDA. And while FDA regulations sound kind of scary, it's really to help protect everybody involved, right? We want to make sure everyone is being safe from an infectious disease perspective, and the FDA is there to really help keep all clinics and all practices that do this reputable, safe for everybody involved. We help with that psychological assessment of donors and gestational carriers, as well as emotional support services. For a lot of people, for single parents or same-sex couples, it might be like they've always known that they need a gestational carrier or a sperm donor to have a baby. But for couples that might have eggs and sperm inside the relationship, but maybe not able to use them and have to go through this process, I think that there's a lot to think about, and it can be emotionally difficult. And I think that there's a lot to learn and a lot of support that we are able to give our patients. Also, legal representation. So it's really important that usually sperm comes from a sperm bank unless it's a known donor. But in terms of egg donors and gestational carriers, you really want to protect your parental rights. So if you are using an egg donor and a gestational carrier, you need to have a legal contract with both separately to protect your parental rights to the eggs, to the created embryos, and to the baby that is developing and born. So we help you with all of that so that you get your baby at the end, and it makes things really smooth. And we have people who are just, these are not just random lawyers. These are specialized reproductive attorneys who this is all that they do.
Dr. Rodgers, I wanted to ask Monica if she has anything to add to
third party
as well.
Hi, thanks for joining. I can chime in here, and please, Dr. Rodgers, jump in if there's anything that you want to add. So I think Dr. Rodgers did an incredible job really explaining kind of this big picture of third-party reproduction. And so again, my name is Monica. I've been with the organization for almost 10 years. All of those 10 years have been spent in the third-party department, also known as the Center for Collaborative Reproduction. So there's definitely a lot of unique scenarios. Again, as Dr. Rodgers said, there's multiple options for your treatment. So a lot of families that we work with need egg donors for a variety of reasons. Dr. Rodgers had gave plenty of examples for those reasons. We can work with a fresh or live donor in real time, meaning that woman will be donating her eggs to you like during a time frame that you are aware of. We also work with a select few of preferred frozen egg banks. that are very reputable, within the fertility community. They adhere to all of our strict guidelines and standards. And those egg banks would have already cycled women that they had deemed appropriate for donation. And those eggs are already frozen and available for purchase. So I think deciding between a fresh egg donor, fresh or live, or a frozen egg donor depends on a variety of things. You absolutely want to review that with your doctor. But a lot of things that drive those decisions for families are, as Dr. Rodgers had mentioned, family goal size. How many children are you, hoping to have? Also, if you're going to do PGTA testing, that tends to be a driving factor on which option might be best for you. Also, how many sperm sources there'll be, that might drive your decision. And then financial as well. So a lot of families, maybe if they don't have insurance coverage for egg donation, they may find that the frozen option is a more economical option for them. So those may be some things that drive your decision. Also, just the donor that you're looking for, whether that's based on background, ethnicity, or whatever your preference may be, that may drive where you find your egg donor from. Either way, there's still a review process that goes into it, whether you're able to move forward with that donor or not. Sperm donor, like Dr. Rodgers had mentioned, there's anonymous sperm banks. We work with, again, a handful of accredited banks across the US. I should also mention the frozen eggs, also only from the US, will work with egg banks that are licensed in the US. So for anonymous sperm donors, you can work with these frozen cryobanks that we work with. You'll see profiles, pictures, things like that. There's still a review process that needs to happen on the clinic's end. You can purchase sperm and have it shipped to our facility, or you can work with a known sperm donor, which would again happen in real time. There's some testing that needs to happen, but that person is being tested and then will provide their sample for your treatment in real time. Gestational carrier, also known as a surrogate, would be someone that we would screen for you to carry your child. And you can go through an agency like Dr. Rodgers had mentioned. That's primarily, I would say, where most of our families find their gestational carriers is through agencies that specifically recruit gestational carriers, or it may be someone in your life that's known to you. Now, all these people will need to go through the exact same process. There's just because you know someone doesn't mean that we're going to accept them. We want you to have the best possible opportunity to have a healthy pregnancy and child. And so that same rigorous testing and those rules are always going to apply, whether you know the person or not. And I saw some of the questions, which I know we're going to get to the end, but Fertility Centers of Illinois does have our own fresh in-house egg donor program where we recruit and screen egg donors that are exclusive to Fertility Centers of Illinois patients only. We do not have a gestational carrier agency where we recruit and screen gestational carriers. So I saw that it was in one of the questions. We do not have an agency that's in-house. We work with outside agencies that do that recruiting. If we can go to the next slide, please. I'm not sure who's in charge of the slides. Okay, well, we might be frozen. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Dr. Rodgers.
Sorry about that. I was frozen. It was
okay.
having a hard time for a second.
No problem. So as I mentioned, we do have this in-house egg donor program, which is something that's very important to us and significant. So the majority of these young women live local within the area, within a certain radius, but they're all pre-screened. They've all met with someone from our team. We all become very close, to these women, very familiar with them and their lives and their goals and their reasons for helping other families, it's truly remarkable. After 10 years, I'm still in awe of women that want to give their eggs for another family that needs them to grow their family truly. The best thing about our in-house egg donor program is these women who are trying to become donors are pre-vetted. So we have done all the medical pre-screening, all the psychological pre-screening. Our acceptance rate is very low, which is a good thing. It usually sits around the 5 to 7% mark. So really what that means is the hundreds and hundreds of applicants we get, we're only accepting about 5 to 7% of those women. That is how rigorous our screening is. Because again, our goal is for you to have, optimal egg donors to choose from with great ovarian reserve, great medical family history, all of those things. The great thing is you can also learn a little bit about them personally. There's a variety of different profiles out there for different agencies, but for our program, they talk about their hobbies, their interests, some of their skill sets, whether that's art, sports, things like that. There's pictures of these women from when they are, babies, newborns, all the way till present. We don't share pictures of their children or their family members just for privacy reasons, but you will see photos of these women that are looking to be egg donors in our program. So we can go to the next slide. So a known donor, I touched on this before. And so typically a known donor, whether it's a known egg donor, a known sperm donor, or a known gestational carrier, is somebody in your life that you knew prior to treatment. Many people select this option for a variety of reasons. For example, one sister might donate her eggs to her other sister. And the driving reason behind that is to have a genetic connection to that child. Other people may have a best friend that will carry their child for them. So there's a variety of different reasons and scenarios that I could give you, but we will absolutely facilitate your known donor screening. Again, I had mentioned before briefly that they will have to meet all of our rigorous testing standards. They will need to meet that FDA screening that Dr. Rodgers had talked about, which I'll expand on more. You will need separate legal counsel, whether it's an anonymous donor or a known donor. Again, that's to protect you, to protect the donor, protect any future children born from treatment. And so I think that a couple of important things to mention about a known donor is there's really not going to be any, I don't know what the best word is, like there's not going to be any exceptions to be made just because someone is maybe related to you or close to you, or you're able to maybe, feel that you have a better experience with that person if they're not an ideal candidate. We are your advocates. We are on your side. We want you to have optimal treatment. You're going to review all of these things at length with your nurse and your doctor. A known candidate is a really great option if they are still optimal for your treatment plan. So I hope that
I tell patients this all the time. In fact, I told somebody this today, just like Monica said, we're there to advocate for success. And a lot of times, whether it's a gestational carrier that or from an agency, right? The agency, is there to present a person to carry a baby. My job is to medically assess that person. And if there's any red flags, anything that I think could complicate or put your pregnancy at risk, then, I'm real picky. I want you to be successful. My goal for you is to have a healthy baby at the end, certainly, which is aligned, but not 100% aligned with the agency, which is to give you a person that you match with. My job is to make sure we're getting a healthy baby at the end. We all want the same thing. But from a medical perspective, it's important that the physician and nursing team review and we not only review, we adjudicate all of the prior pregnancies. So we're not just taking their word for it, we're getting all their records. We are really making sure that this person, as best as we can tell, is a good candidate.
Yes, thank you for that. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I actually think this is back to Dr. Rodgers, actually. And so I'm going to stay on and we'll answer more questions at the end as it relates to egg donation and gestational carriers.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Okay, so there's sort of two steps to making a baby with, donor eggs or just a gestational carrier. So the first step is to create embryos. So we need to get eggs, and this is either from an egg donor or a gestation or the intended parent. We mix them with sperm, and that's either sperm from a sperm bank or sperm from the intended parent or parents if is two people giving sperm, and we create embryos. Those embryos are then typically cryopreserved, not always. Sometimes we put them in as soon as they're created, but they can be cryopreserved. And that is the end of the first step. Once we have embryos, then the next step is to get the either intended parent, if you're using an egg donor or gestational carrier, pregnant. And so we obviously place that embryo into the uterus after the uterus is prepared with hormones for several weeks, and then we're able to do a pregnancy test. A lot of times for a lot of patients, we can do this like right away, all in the same cycle. For a lot of patients who are using gestational carriers, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to find a gestational carrier, usually it does, than to find an egg donor. And so typically we will work on getting them on the list for a gestational carrier and work on getting embryos. Now, some gestational carrier agencies will not even put you on the list until you already have embryos. But that is something to consider, that there is this sort of two-step process. Just see. Move on to the next slide here. Oh, let me just go back for a second here. Usually the process of creating embryos can take several weeks. Usually there's a cycle to prepare the egg donor or intended parent if they're using their egg's body. Then the stimulation process is approximately 2 weeks of hormonal injections that ends in an egg retrieval. We then inject sperm into those eggs and grow them in the lab for 5 to 7 days. That is that first process. Typically takes, I would say, sort of in that 6 to 8 week range, once we have the person ready to go. In general, I think it takes people, I think Monica might be able to speak to this. Like, how long does it take to, somebody asked me this today, how long does it take to find an egg, let's just say fresh egg donor frozen, it's already procured, you just pay your money and they get shipped. I think it's approximately like 3 to 4 months. Is that a good?
Yeah, I think 3 to 4 months is on the short side. I typically counsel families 3-month minimum up to 6 months if that donor is available. So a lot of the screening that we're doing takes up to 4 to 5 weeks to even result. So that's even before, we were able to deem if this donor is qualified. And so I always try to, manage expectations as best as I can. 3 to 4 months is a target. That's a great goal. And we always want to go for that. But typically due to scheduling and cycle timing and all of those things, it's probably anywhere from 3 to 6 months before your donor's ready to start. And then that process would start what Dr. Rodgers had just gone through about that, the preparation for the cycle and then the cycle itself.
And then what would you say, Monica, is the average time for a gestational carrier? I've heard anywhere between, I've heard 6 months would seem short to me, but I've also heard like 18 months.
So I will say wait lists to work with gestational carriers are typically longer, in my personal opinion, than working with egg donors. So you are correct. I have some families that are working with agencies where the wait list to even start to be matched or work with a gestational carrier can be 6 months. I've also heard up to 24. So I think it just depends on the agency that you're working with. And that's, again, before we would even have any medical records to do a medical assessment on that person. Once we have all those medical records, the gestational carrier screening is more driven by cycle time. The results don't take as long, which is great, but it's just, depending where she's at in her cycle to do that specific testing as it relates to uterine evaluation. I would say a gestational carrier, once they, walk into our clinic and we're ready to screen them, can be ready in as short as 2 months, but the wait list, ahead of that time is typically much longer than an egg donor.
Maybe we can ask Curtis and Josh to speak to sort of like how long, just timing wise, how long it took you guys from how long did it take? Well, maybe we should introduce you first. I know that we're planning on doing this later, but maybe you can talk about like your experience and how, like, just timing wise, how long did it take to like get those embryos? And then from the embryo stage, how long did it take for the gestational carrier to find a gestational carrier?
Yeah. So hi,
First,
everybody.
I'm Josh.
I'm Curtis. Thanks for having us. From a timing perspective for us, we started our journey with just like an info gathering back in 2021. We came to FCI in August of 2022, and we started looking for an egg donor probably right around that same time in August of 2022. The first egg donor we matched with canceled on us. So we had a few months delay due to that. But we got connected with another one pretty quickly. So I would say we spent about 6 months trying to go from egg donor to embryo. And we, from a gestational carrier perspective, we actually got really lucky. A friend of ours stepped up So we had a known gestational carrier. So we had a little bit more of a free timeline on that perspective.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. All right, let's go on to this next slide here about treatment options. So when we're doing treatment, obviously one option is to do inseminations if somebody in the couple is carrying their own pregnancy, right? So this is for people using mainly sperm donors. Also IVF, this is required for egg donors or gestational carriers or embryo donors. And this is certainly one of the most successful treatments that you can do. And we collect eggs from an egg donor. We create embryos using typically, when we're thinking about a scenario like Curtis and Josh's, from, the intended parent's sperm, and we create embryos. And then, the genetic testing of embryos is available, and we're able to take a few cells from an embryo that has reached a stage of a blastocyst, which is approximately 200 cells. We typically will take about 5 cells off, and we're able to really assess to make sure that embryo has the correct number of chromosomes. I was recently at the one of the Men Having Babies event where I was on a panel, and we were talking about sort of pros and cons of genetic testing. And there's certainly some pros and cons. I would say in a day and age where not all states are going to allow the ability to terminate a pregnancy, also in a day and age where, like, as much as you can talk about it and have it in a contract, you really can never truly control somebody else's body, and making sure that an embryo is genetically healthy before we're putting it into a gestational carrier is, something that I really recommend my patients consider doing. All right. So I don't know, Monica, are you going to review this, or is this me? I can talk about this.
Either way, I mean, I think I can chime in. Cost is probably one of the most common questions that we get, and it is the hardest to answer. What I can say is truly each patient's final cost is going to be different. It depends on so many things, what your treatment plan is, if you have insurance coverage or not. If you do have insurance coverage, what is that going to cover? What I can say is if you use an egg donor, if you use a gestational carrier, or if you use a sperm donor, there will always be an out-of-pocket cost. Even if you have 100% fertility coverage, at some point, there's going to be fees that are associated with treatment that are not necessarily medical. For example, your legal agreement, Dr. Rodgers has mentioned that you'll have to pay an attorney, right? That's not a medical fee, so you can't bill your insurance for that, but it relates to your treatment. So there are going to be definitely costs that you'll want to plan for that will either be paid to Fertility Centers of Illinois, or like an outside entity such as an agency or an attorney that will never be covered by insurance. So it's a very, very complicated question. The good news is there's loan options. We have amazing financial coordinators that will set an appointment time with you and review your individual treatment plan as it relates to your insurance, the specifics that surround your care. So you can get a really good understanding of what that looks like. But what I always try to advise families of is there's always going to be some fee that is not going to be covered by your insurance. So, you can plan for that. Unfortunately, it may be more significant or larger for other people than other families. It really just depends. But I think if you can plan that, maybe that will help you, with that financial planning. Again, there are loan options. There are refund programs with some of the egg banks that we work with and things like that. So these are good things to, if you are established with us as a practice, you can meet with your financial coordinator and they can answer all the specifics once your treatment plan is established. What I mean by that is, have you and the doctor said, okay, we need to use an egg donor. We need to use an egg donor and a gestational carrier. That's what your treatment plan will entail. And then the financial coordinator can give you the best estimate for what that cost would look like.
Okay, let's talk about insurance overview. So obviously, for people who are listening who are in the state of Illinois, Illinois is a mandated state. What does that mean? That in general, there is a mandate that that employers that are based in Illinois offer fertility benefits. Now, there's a lot of loopholes. If you're not based in Illinois, if you're less than 25 employees, if you're religiously affiliated, if you're self-insured, which is a big loophole for a lot of big companies are self-insured. They do not have to, provide fertility coverage. So not all people who are working in Illinois have Illinois-based insurance. And so while a lot of our patients do, I would say probably 75 to 85% do, not everybody. And sometimes fertility benefits may include only diagnostic like testing and not necessarily treatment. Some will cover donor treatment for like donor egg. Some will cover, there's one insurance company out there that will cover some of the costs to pay for the donor eggs. It's not common, but certainly every insurance is different. Just like Monica said, we have to look at your specific policy from your specific employer to figure out sort of what that will be. So there's not really like a blanket term for that. Obviously, it's important you understand your own fertility coverage. You can always talk to your human resources at your place of employment. And then obviously a lot of insurance companies require prior authorization that can take 15 business days. That's 3 weeks. It's real annoying sometimes. But we got to sort of jump through the hoops if they're paying the bill. Other insurance companies don't require prior authorization or take only 2 days to give approval. So it's really very variable, but good news, we know how to navigate that for you. We submit things for you and get things rolling in terms of getting your insurance information and approvals. Want to go over some of the shared risk programs. What is shared risk? This is a type of program that offers, peace of mind in terms of knowing that a lot of them are sort of guarantee programs where you're offered treatment, and if you're successful, great. If not, you get your money back. And for a lot of couples, and a lot of patients, that is very reassuring to know that. This is an example of one of the shared risk programs. There's several different options that our financial coordinators can go over. But like this one is 3 egg retrievals and 3 egg retrievals and unlimited embryo transfers. So this is like, a option for somebody who may be utilizing and not have insurance coverage to utilize treatment. Now, I'm not sure it makes sense if you're using an egg donor, because you probably don't need 3 retrievals. We've got to really assess what your needs are and what the financial options are for you. This would be more of somebody who is using their own eggs and a gestational carrier or something like that. In terms of counseling and support services, we have a dedicated in-house behavioral health team. All of the egg donors and gestational carriers are screened by them, Dr. Tiffany Edwards and Susan Rosado. Also, we offer support and counseling to patients who are using egg donors, sperm donors, embryo donor, and gestational carriers. There can be a lot to think about, and just, how to talk to other people, how to talk to your child about being potentially donor conceived or conceived through a gestational carrier. We also have several support groups, including one called No Partner Needed, which is a support group for single patients. A lot of my patients really enjoy that one, who are single patients. All right, so I want to introduce you. We already sort of talked to Curtis and Josh. I am going to allow them to introduce themselves and hear about we already started to hear about their journey, but hear a little bit more about their journey.
Thank you. Yeah. And thanks for having us. There's a lot to cover, so I guess we'll just jump right in. We started our journey with friends who had gone through surrogacy before. So we wanted to be that for anybody else. We wanted to kind of open up the conversation with anybody. So if you do have questions outside of this webinar, that we do have socials there. Feel free to reach out. We are an open book completely. That being said, we were married in 2021, and we both knew pretty early on that we wanted a few kids, two really to be exact.
I've been wanting a third, so there we go.
And we chose it, or we wanted to have a kid with my sperm and a kid with Josh's sperm, but they have the same mother. So we did choose to go the fresh egg donor route, and we chose fresh because it does give you the option or the likelihood of having more eggs to split between the two of us. So in terms of rolling that dice, we wanted to do a fresh retrieval, and we ended up getting quite a few that we could choose and use from. Went through the genetic testing process, and like I mentioned before, we had a friend step up to be a gestational carrier, which was unbelievable, and we are so grateful for that.
Before that, we were already kind of in the works, talking through, looking for GC, and there was a lot of options out there, but we luckily ended up.
Yeah, it was a lot of time, like we were talking about before. I think when we were starting the conversation, the agency that we were chatting with told us that there was a 15-month wait line to be matched with somebody. So the timelines seem real. So we were really grateful that our friend kind of came to us with that. And we are current patients. We are actually 6 weeks pregnant today.
We're just jumping right ahead.
So yeah, I think that's a little bit about us. I know
It's amazing.
No, thank
Yeah.
you. So I don't, are there any questions that might be able to help lead anything that we might have already missed?
Let me see what's next. Hold on. Oh, yes, this was, okay. This is just
I have a great
yes.
question that will maybe help, just in, what you mentioned one, but there's often things that don't go as planned. Can you share more about maybe what
good
things
one.
didn't go as you had thought or as you
Yeah.
had expected? Because I think that, at least in my experience, I don't want it to come off negative, but there are a lot of things that can come up and that we weren't expecting. Timelines can change, things, change rapidly, right? Things can be going on track and then we have to take a different route. So I think if you can share a little bit more about that in your experience, and you still got to a successful place today, even though there might've been a couple of bumps in the road along the way.
Yeah, so I guess
Two big ones.
two big ones. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the egg donor backing out on us. So that was a little bit of a gut check for us. The egg donor had some family issues that she had to cancel her cycle with, which put a pretty heavy timeline on our gestational carrier. And that was a little bit rough to deal with, but the egg donor agency that we worked with was really supportive through that process and got us matched with somebody else pretty quickly. And I think it turned out to be a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. We ended up with somebody who'd had a proven record and actually had numbers. So, before, we based on everything we knew too, but I think this really did put us in a better place to both have, I guess, enough options between the two of us to have two babies.
Yeah. And then I think another piece that is pretty important to realize, we knew that it was going to be a financial burden. We knew that the whole process for us, we didn't have any insurance coverage for our journey at all. So everything was out of pocket for us. So sorry, the dog is jumping over. She wants to say hi.
Your first baby.
Yeah, right. Exactly. She's not ready for baby number 2
No,
yet.
she's not.
We knew that the financial piece was going to be rough. We ended up getting financial support through a loan. And that loan was great because they didn't only work with FCI, but they also worked with the egg donor agency we chose, as well as the pharmacy that the egg donor and our GC got medication from. So a good portion of those costs were covered through financing, which helped a lot.
Yeah.
And then I think just timeline wise and understanding the process with your egg donor. Obviously FCI was really great in keeping us apprised daily what was going on with our egg donor. And then once we had an egg retrieval, what was going on from day 5, day 6. But realizing how quickly those numbers fall was surprising to us. I know we came in and our egg donor ended up having 30 eggs retrieved, which was great and a large number from what we were told. Every step of that process, a lot of the viable eggs that we could use whittled down. So I don't think we were quite prepared for that piece of it. I think we were really excited in the beginning and realized very quickly that
The number kept getting a
the
little
number kept getting a little
smaller.
smaller and our odds kept getting a little bit smaller and smaller. So yeah, that was
And can you share, not to interrupt, but can you share how many embryos did you end up with at the end?
we
So
did
you had
end up
30 eggs and those were split. How many were, do you know how many were split? Did you guys do like a 50-50 split?
Yeah, we actually had 32 eggs retrieved, 30 viable from the very first stage.
Mature. Mhm.
Yep, we split those 15 each. We each out of that had 10 embryos that we sent for genetic testing.
You each had 10?
We each
Yeah.
had 10, yeah.
That is,
Fabulous.
I will tell you, above average.
I know that,
Yeah.
and we were extremely happy for that too.
Yeah.
And then after genetic testing came back, we each ended up with 5 fully viable embryos that we could freeze
Still
over.
fabulous numbers, right,
so
Dr.
great.
Yeah,
Rodgers?
no, I mean, I will tell you that's certainly above average. I think there's typically, right, I call it dropout. Of the follicles somebody has, we don't get all of them as eggs. They're not all mature, they don't all fertilize, they don't all grow normally, they're not all genetically normal. That's why we need 30 eggs so that, but it sounds like your egg donor did amazing.
She did great. And that's again, with the blessing in disguise, our first egg donor backed out. This one, like Josh mentioned, had a proven retrieval before us, which is great because if you go into an agent or an egg donor agency relationship with somebody that hasn't done it, you have really no basis of understanding what they can provide or produce. So yeah, it worked out really well. And obviously went well from that perspective. The embryo did take on our first try as well, our first transfer. So it's been a wild ride of the last few months, but it's all been positive.
You guys come back next year with your baby for
Absolutely.
Pride. Will you come back for Pride with your baby?
Absolutely.
Do you guys know, is it a boy or girl?
It's a boy.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
I think
That's
we're breaking
so
all the
exciting.
rules.
I
It's
know,
still
right?
early, but it's fine. We're sharing our journey. So yeah, we're definitely announcing the name and all of it. We're excited.
I'm so excited for you guys. And I look forward to following your journey on social media. And I will just say that Curtis and Josh are not my personal patients. So this is the first time I'm meeting them, but I'm so excited to follow along on your journey. And next Pride Month, you'll have to come back for our webinar on this topic and bring your little boy with you.
Absolutely.
Well,
Fantastic. Should we get to some questions?
yeah, I was gonna say, I do want to leave some time for some questions. So I can field some out here. Do you know what the average costs for egg donation through the egg donor program and surrogacy through FCI's partner? I know that cost is something we covered a little bit.
Yeah, I can add a little bit more. So our fresh egg donor program, as of right now, it's $15,000 is our match fee. So that fee is going to cover the egg donor's compensation, which this isn't really something we dove into so much, but these are some of the costs that I said that are related to your treatment, but they're not exactly medical. So donors and gestational carriers, they are compensated for their time and their effort as it relates to this process. So just a quick breakdown of that $15,000 agency fee that doesn't cover, her treatment per se. It's her compensation is the majority of it, about half. She's compensated after the egg retrieval. There's supplemental insurance that we require as a practice as it relates to any egg donation related complications. There is the attorney fee is worked in there, her attorney fee. So yours you would pay on your own, but the donor's attorney fee is something that you're covering. So that's in there. All that medical pre-screening that we talked about is worked into that fee. And then the remainder of that is mainly, like administrative fees as it relates to us being able to run that program. Gestational carrier agency fees, they vary significantly. They're broken down very differently. You'd have to contact them specifically. some of we work with a lot of local agencies in the area, and you'd have to contact them specifically.
There's
for
a
their
huge
cost.
range on that.
Yeah, so I know that was not really a direct answer, but again, finances are really complicated. So once we know more about exactly what agencies you're going to work with, what your care and
But I
treatment
think
plans
that's
are,
a,
to that.
yeah. What else, Holly?
Is there a thought behind if using a donor egg and going fresh or frozen, if you're hoping for 1 or 2 children, as far as the end result and making embryos, is one better than the other?
So if you want more than 1 child, a fresh donor is probably going to get you there more reliably. Remember, frozen eggs, we get about 5 to 6 eggs in an egg lot. It's guaranteed 1 embryo for one transfer. And so fresh, as Curtis and Josh had mentioned, usually gives you enough to be able to have more than 1 child.
What if a gestational carrier lives in another state? Would there be an issue with the screening and having embryos transferred?
Yeah, so no, the answer is no, there's not a lot of challenges. I would say the majority of our gestational carriers and egg donors lives in other states. We can do the screening where they fly to Fertility Centers of Illinois. We could do the screening, or we could do the screening locally to them if they have access to like a reputable fertility clinic that they can get some of that testing done at. But then they will need to eventually fly to Fertility Centers of Illinois, whether it's an egg donor or the gestational carrier for their egg retrieval or their embryo transfer. Dr. Rodgers touched on this earlier. You really want to make sure you speak to a reproductive attorney in the state that the gestational carrier lives in, as it relates to, some of these changes with, as it relates to termination and abortion laws. So for example, if you have a gestational carrier in Tennessee, just do a quick Google search, Tennessee reproductive lawyers, and just get, some legal advice as it relates to that.
I thank you for that. I have a question for Curtis and Josh. Can you talk a little bit about your legal journey and if you've met with any lawyers?
Yeah, in fact, we actually started our journey with an attorney first. We had friends who used FCI, so we kind of knew FCI was going to be where we ended up, but we didn't start there. We started with the attorney side of things. We chose an attorney based off of their reputation. She essentially helped write the law in Illinois for same-sex couples. So that was a really big, important piece for us. We didn't really meet with many others. We had friends who used her as well. So she came highly recommended to us. I will say from the legal side of things, it gets pretty in-depth, not only with your egg donor and what happens in the future, but contracting things out with your gestational carrier. There's a lot of things involved in that. And then things that we haven't even come across yet, but will end up when we have a baby, getting both of our names on the birth certificate and whatnot, so that we can make sure that we're protected.
This is another legal question. Do you need legal representation if you use a frozen egg donor?
So that's a great question. So if you're working with a frozen egg donor or a frozen sperm donor from a cryobank, at that time, those donors signed legal consent forms that they're legally, relinquishing their rights to that genetic material. So you do not. You need a legal agreement if you're working with someone live or in real time. That's a great question.
See a lot of questions about support groups. They're all virtual. You can see them on Zoom, and if you visit fcionline.com in our resources section, we have links to our support groups. And the monthly infertility group, there is a single parents group, and also quarterly we do a pregnancy loss support group. What emotional and or mental health screenings are done for sperm donors typically? Is it donor provided, like relying on their honesty?
Yeah, so all health, I shouldn't say all. The majority of health and mental health information is self-reported. Known sperm donors are required to go through a psychological consultation with one of our behavioral health specialists, and they also have to take a personality test. So based on those two items and the medical history assessment, that's all looked at comprehensively to determine if that person is, deemed eligible to be a donor. But yes, a lot of the information is self-reported.
And I also am seeing questions about where you can find legal resources. That is another, that is information that is on our website as well. If you go under treatments for a gestational carrier, we have links to the legal resources available. We have several reproductive attorneys to work with.
Oh, and I think just to chime in, Dr. Rodgers said it best. We really, really, really want you working with a reproductive attorney. We have people that will work with like a real estate attorney or a variety of other attorneys. And we advise, I see Curtis and Josh smiling. It is so in-depth. There are so many things to cover. We advise very, very strongly against that. It is in your best interest for you and your family to work with a reproductive attorney.
Yeah, even like family and estate planners don't have even close to the wherewithal to manage anything through that process. Yeah.
I work in a small law firm, and I was happily handing this off to work with somebody else. Yeah.
I'm going to leave us with one more question, and then we'll wrap this up. I'm sorry, I know we're a minute over, but Dr. Rodgers, can you explain fertility testing for someone who hasn't done any fertility testing? What is kind of the importance, and what can people expect to learn from it?
Right. So, in terms of just general fertility testing, I think that it's really important to understand where your fertility potential lies. So, how many eggs do you have? If you're somebody with ovaries, is your uterus healthy? If you're somebody with sperm, do you have healthy sperm that looks like it's in normal numbers? Those are all things. And we combine that with the number one factor of success, especially for people who have eggs, is age. And then, so that is obviously why, to help us figure out treatments, that kind of, to figure out what treatment's best. I did want to answer one more question that I saw in here, if that's okay. There was a question that said, are you able to speak to the egg donors or have contact with them for health reasons after the baby's born? And typically, if it is a what we call sort of unidentified, or we don't really use the term anonymous anymore, just because you can do a cheek swab and find out who all your relatives are. It's not, anonymous is not really a thing anymore. But if it's an unknown or sort of unidentified egg donor, are you able to have some sort of relationship? And I think it depends on the egg donor and if they're open to that. I do know of several patients, and Monica might be able to speak to this as well. I do know several patients who set up like an anonymous Gmail account so that they could email each other in an anonymous way if there was questions down the road, or they wanted to send pictures or have some sort of anonymous contact with them, not using names or something like that. Obviously, with sperm banks, there is like, the ability to, some of them are completely open. Some of them say, at the age of 18, I'm happy to be identified, right? When we think about people who are wanting to be egg donors or sperm donors, these are not people who are interested in being parents to these children, right? These are people who are giving out of the kindness of their hearts, and their, what a gift they're giving to be able to help other people become parents. And they, so that often once that somebody's an adult, if they want to understand about their family history or whatever, I think they're a little bit more open to it than, being contacted. So yes, there are ability to do that. Now, Monica may want to speak. I think there are some egg donors who really don't want any contact. So I think it's a really individualized, but that is something you can ask for if it's something important to you.
Yeah, I think you did a great job summarizing that, Dr. Rodgers. It's definitely case by case. I will say in the majority of instances, it's often driven by the families that are using the egg donor that would like some level of openness. I think I've maybe in 10 years have 1 to 2 donors that were not agreeable to some level. Like Dr. Rodgers said, this is usually done through the attorneys. So they'll either like Dr. Rodgers said, exchange an anonymous email address, or they may exchange their real email addresses, but there's parameters on what it can be used for, such as like health reporting to each other or milestones, things of that nature. Maybe that email address is only available to future children born when they're 18. There's a lot of different options that your reproductive attorney can go through with you. There's also something called the donor sibling registry, which is, I see Curtis and Josh nodding, so I'm not sure if you're a part of that, if you want to share your experience, but it's really an anonymous, private social media sort of, where families can link with their egg donors. I mean, everyone has to agree to do this. And it's kind of a way to see how many children are born from certain egg donors, how many families have worked with them. But Curtis and Josh, if you want to chime in about that, that would be great.
Yeah, it was our egg donor's choice to be put onto that database. She would rather have us communicate that way. So for future health issues, if they came up, if the children at 18 want to reach out, we have the database to do so. So we have her username on the database, but it's an anonymous username. And then we also have, like you mentioned, our attorneys who can interact with each other to figure things out further.
Great. And then the only other thing, there was a question about like, do we work with people who need a gestational carrier who aren't infertile but have medical reasons why they can't carry a pregnancy? And this was reviewed very early, so it's possible someone joined us after we reviewed that. But yes, certainly if there's medical reasons why you can't carry a pregnancy yourself, that we do that all the time is gestational carrier work. So while I know we're doing this during Pride Month and we're talking a lot about, helping build families for our LGBTQ community, I think there's also other people certainly that are, who aren't, that still need egg donors, sperm donors, or gestational carriers. And we do all of that. So this is really helping to get you information for anybody who's interested or needs collaborative reproduction.
To add on to what Dr. Rodgers said, so in the state of Illinois, if you are working with our facility and we're treating you in the state of Illinois, you do need a medical necessity to use a gestational carrier. So not having a uterus, that's a medical necessity. Or let's say you take a certain medication, that's a contraindication to pregnancy. That's a reason.
The comment that the person posed, the question the person poses was that she had a previous very complicated pregnancy that would not be safe to carry another, and that certainly would qualify. And Monica, will you help correct me? I have had a patient who had no medical necessity, like no medical reason at all. She just had like a important career and didn't want to carry pregnancy. And in that scenario, we had to like go through a judge to get approval. Is that still the way? This was a while ago.
So again, like best practice is you need, we just recently worked with our legal team to re-advise another family about this. In Illinois, the statute is written where you really need a medical necessity. It doesn't mean it can't be done if you don't, but it's much harder. There's many more hurdles and there's more risks.
Yeah.
In terms of like legal names on birth certificates, things that Josh and Curtis had mentioned. So just there's a lot of things to consider as it relates to that. So it's definitely really complicated. I know we're going a little bit long, but there is one question that I see that I wanted to answer. It's related to someone having their eggs frozen and they the question is, if I already have eggs frozen, but need a gestational carrier, would you recommend starting the process with my husband for embryos now before we find a gestational carrier? That's a really great question. I would absolutely establish care with our practice first if you haven't yet, or wherever your eggs are frozen. Hopefully it's with us. Because we need to start working on very specific FDA related items to make sure that we can transfer your tissue to a gestational carrier. And also we need to make sure you have embryos to transfer to a gestational carrier. But with that being said, if you're going to work with an agency, I would start getting on some of those wait lists that we had discussed. Again, some of those can be over a year long. And so kind of doing that in tandem, I think would be best.
Thank you, Monica. And I just really quick, if Dr. Rodgers, if you don't mind going over prizes, I mentioned we were going to do a prize.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I promise for anyone who is short on time, I will do this, quickly. So our first prize is a year of cryo storage for a new patient. So cryo storage, you store your eggs and freeze them for later when you as an individual or a couple are ready to use them and start a family. And we have 30 plus cryo storage tanks, and that's where they are kept. We are giving that away to Courtney. So I will be emailing you about your prize following this event. So keep a lookout in your email. We are also giving away a fertility awareness check as our second prize, which includes the most predictive fertility testing to determine an individual or couple's chances of getting pregnant. And this can test eggs, it can test sperm, it can test both with blood tests and ultrasounds and semen analysis. The retail cost for this is over $1,000. We do it for $99. And today you are getting one for free, and that is going to Madeline. And then finally, we are giving away tickets to the Chicago Red Stars. We are the official fertility partner of the Chicago Red Stars women's soccer team. And we are giving away tickets to a home game at SeatGeek Stadium. And we are giving away 3 sets of tickets. Those are going to Tanisha, Allie, and Ben. So again, I will reach out to you about getting your tickets. So thank you everyone who joined us. Thank you so much to Dr. Rodgers and Monica. Thank you so much to Curtis and Josh. There were a bunch of congratulations, and thank you for sharing your story in the comments and in the Q&A. So we also appreciate you joining us as well. I think you provided a lot of insight and an excellent perspective.
And can you, this was going to be recorded, but if you want to visit, maybe we can post something on like our Instagram about how to follow Curtis and Josh if we missed it, so we can follow your journey on social media.
Yeah.
And
the first time I saw them was on Instagram talking about us, and I was like, oh my God, this is such a great story. We appreciate you being so open about your journey.
Yes, I think, and it really helps other patients and families who it can be just, I know you know this personally, it can be just really overwhelming to think about all the things. And that's what we're here to do, is to sort of break down those barriers, help you piece by piece, step by step, walk you through it. And, I am just so excited for your success and can't wait to hear about the rest of your journey.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you. And we are happy to be a resource for anybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone.